there is something kind of so unreal, like virtual, literally, about sort of online life. And, you know, I mean, I guess just personally having spent so much time outside and like recovering from being so ill and, you know, realizing, I suppose, just very simply, like the simple things in life, you know, like how beautiful it is to see like a bird fly and, you know, I don't know, to be outside, to enjoy the sun. And I don't know, like these things, you know, are actually like a revelation about beauty and about the world and about one's place in the world in a certain way that's very different from a kind of this sort of, I don't know, dreary modern capture, like, you know, and I think there is a kind of question someone raised on Twitter, the only probably interesting question, which was like, aren't there actually some reactionary elements to what I'm saying? Like, it's like almost like a Heideggerian thing in some ways, right? That my critique of technology in the modern world, in a certain way, you know, the celebration of paganism. By the way, I just want to clarify, like, I don't think that we should engage in human sacrifice today in any way. I think that was really referring to, like, prehistory and evidence of human sacrifice and, you know, the Aztecs and then elsewhere. But in any case, it's something interesting to think about, anthropologically, for sure. But, you know, perhaps not to, like, actually do.
If the sacrificial victim was a volunteer, I would consider the ethics to be at least debatable.
This is Bataille's question.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, and like Bataille is very interesting. I mean, for thinking about the left sacred and, you know, like that kind of question, can you sort of resacralize the world? I mean, yeah, this has all been discussed before. This is not new, any of this, really.
Not to mention there's obviously a long-standing and vibrant tradition of drawing on the relationship with nature as a crucial resource in left-wing emancipatory liberation struggles of all kinds.
Yeah,
right? So, I mean,
of course.
It's sort of obvious.
Yeah, I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, like, none of us would exist without the sun. I mean, we'd all, like, not exist without nature. I mean, it's, you know, we are part of nature.
And also the relationship to the land as a kind of emotional and community resource that really powers a lot of the most powerful and significant forms of resistance to kind of capitalism or whatever you want to call it.
Absolutely. And like there are, you know, it's very complicated to think about kind of ecology and politics. But yeah, for sure. I mean, you know, this idea of that, you know, the left shouldn't mention land or soil because these have been captured by nationalist projects. You know, that concedes too much ground. Literally concedes the ground to the right. You know, as if we can't talk about specific relations to, so, you know, like, of course we can. And this new film, a recent film, Arcadia, is very interesting on this point, which is a kind of anti-capitalist left film, but it's about folk traditions, it's about the land, you know, it's Paul Wright sort of documentary using found footage. And these sorts of things seem to be like, and Marx's work in Acid Communism was really about this as well, you know, and we have to, like, it seems vital in like the age of like total ecological destruction, environmental destruction, to think about the, you know, the land. We can't just say, you know, oh, some nationalists talk about the land, therefore we can't talk about it. Oh, by the way, on the not being a Nazi front, I just want to clarify, I really hate the state. I'm anti-authoritarian, which includes people telling other people and dictating what they can and can't read, what they can and can't think about, and who they can and can't see or speak to. So, not a Nazi in any of those sense. I'm very against war, for example. I have no military desires whatsoever, other than to maybe, you know, conquer the troubles of one's own heart or something. But, you know, this is, you know, I just want people to feel free. I want them not to feel afraid. I want them to be able to speak honestly and freely. And we've had some really interesting conversations about honesty, you know, and like lots of people we're speaking to these days are very interested in this idea of radical honesty. And what does it mean to, you know, to speak freely, to not feel afraid, to not feel anxious all the time, you know? And for a long time, I really did feel like this. I felt very, very anxious, you know, partly because of the addiction problem but also just this like fear of, you know, saying the wrong thing or, you know, having such fragile relationships with people that you feel guilty and you sort of, and then the loudest people are the ones who kind of grab your attention and sort of take your money and, you know, like sort of dominate you in a certain way. And I think a lot of people are in that feeling maybe anxious and weak, you know, that they don't know what to think. And then you have people telling you what to think, but they're just people too. I mean, who are these people telling you what to think?
I want to take a stab at kind of, without necessarily totalizing your, you know, interesting and nuanced perspective. I want to take a stab at bouncing back at you a kind of
Yeah, do it.
summary, if you will, of the different strands that you're laying out here, because it seems to me like the kind of vision that you're sketching is something like a true radical politics is one in which a relationship to the truth, which could be understood as the people that are actually around you, that your true relationships, but also the truth of the environment, the material environment and the natural environment, to kind of prioritize the immediate truths around you, the truths of friendship, the truths of the environment, and that kind of a kind of radical commitment to those truths coming first, and kind of allowing everything else to be subordinated to those immediate truths, seems to be the kind of message I feel like I'm getting from you. Because when you do that, it's like a totally different way of living in some sense. It's a totally different way of organizing your relationships. It's a totally different way of moving through the world. And it resonates with me a lot, and it's very similar to a lot of things I've been kind of saying and putting out recently. And one of the things that I've really felt or seen about this is that when you organize your priorities in this way, a lot of interesting and positive effects happen. One, you become much harder to kind of manipulate and dominate, really. Like, you become much more intransigent towards kind of bullshit, oppressive forces that kind of characterize most, everyday lives, ourselves included. But you just become less compliant, in a sense. You become less governable.
Yeah.
And that's intrinsically kind of rebellious or resistant to precisely that which most of us abhor and despise, and at least nominally are trying to protest against or resist against. And so, does that resonate with you?
Yeah, completely. I mean, I agree. I think this feeling of like being in the present, having like an intense and like direct feeling about what's happening, like to understand how one feels in the moment, and to recognize whether one is like feeling in balance or off balance or something like this, or like I mean, to sort of to understand what's happening, to almost to have to know your own mind is something I've been thinking a lot about, and like thinking about philosophy as self-defense. What does it mean to actually be secure in what you think, even if what you think is incomplete? So or if what you think is a question. So it's not like knowing the truth is like, here is a block of things that I know for sure. Right. It's not like, here's a set of facts. It might be like, I don't know, being able to combine and recombine multiple different approaches to reality at once. It's like, can I see this conversation from your perspective at the same time as thinking about it from mine? Like, yes, in a way, I can, I can imagine what it's like. And this is a form of kind of power, it seems to me, but a very a sort of beautiful one, not an aggressive one at all, right. But like an empathetic one, a kind of immediate one, a one that's in the moment, a one that isn't anxious. Because anxiety is like this, literally this feeling of constriction where you can't breathe, where you can't think because you can't, because you're confused and actually you're not sort of like letting things happen. You're worried about what might happen, but you're always in the moment. So whatever's happening is happening.
Right.
And that doesn't mean going along with everything. If anything, it means actually having a sort of principle of like discernment and discrimination about what's happening, and saying, like, this thing that's happening is not okay, or, the state is behaving in this way, or like I can see things, in all these different ways at once.
Right. I think something else that people really underestimate about the perspective you're putting forward is the way that it very naturally tends toward a different kind of community.
Yeah.
That is just far superior than the typical ways of kind of forcing kind of fake communities that we have today. It's like, if you live according to the kind of style of life, or, to use a Foucauldian phrase, the kind of aesthetics of existence that you're kind of representing here, you're not just the relationships in your own life start to change in a way that's fundamentally political, but you become open and available to other relationships and then networks of relationships. And when you think about that in the context of the digital age, you suddenly start to see that if you actually get your orientation right around, your relationship to the truth or to the environment or whatever it might be, all of a sudden there can be these kind of nonlinear exponential takeoff effects in terms of social network dynamics. So new communities, when new communities emerge around the truth. And again, that's not an arrogant sense of the truth, like some group has the truth, but more just a kind of intimate, honest awareness, even of one's own uncertainties and ignorances. When you actually organize, when communities emerge organically around a correct relationship to the truth, suddenly that's a game changer for actually rethinking all kinds of prospects for a genuine emancipatory politics that really could take over the world, that really could change the world. All of a sudden it becomes possible to reconceive aggressive, significant, ambitious, large-scale kind of institutional change, but only if you get that the basics and the fundamentals of individuals' relationship to the truth, relationship to their friends, and relationship to the environment right. It's like if you don't get those crucial variables right, and you try to force a community of progress or change or whatever, then you get what is the current kind of face of the left, which is like all of these like people who are basically just like liars and fakers and resentful and sad and angry and basically trying to shut down life wherever they see it. It's like these are two fundamentally different modes of doing politics, and I think the latter one there I just described is obviously failing, and it's obviously just kind of horrific, I think, to any honest person, paying attention. And my sense is that the one you're kind of sketching, there's still so much to be figured out about it, and it's still not nearly common enough for people to be thinking along the lines you're thinking, but in this tradition of kind of radical emancipatory politics.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, I don't know about the kind of ambitions, and obviously you have a different relation to technology, maybe, I mean, obviously it's like a bit ironic we're like filming this to go online, but yeah, I mean, I might want to spend more time in nature in a, egalitarian communist way. I totally think that, and I think being able to overcome anxiety, to actually have honest conversations with everyone you meet, and that could be like someone in the street, it could be anyone, to be open actually, and to not be afraid, but also to be able to admit mistakes. Everybody's made mistakes. I made terrible mistakes when I was drinking. I mean, I was crazy. I mean, I did things I don't remember. I said terrible things. I was blackout drunk. I offended people, I upset people, and I admit that. I really, really do. And, I don't feel great about it. Of course, it's not good that this was the situation, and I would like to apologise to anyone personally. I'm very happy to be messaged, and I will talk to anyone who I've upset in the past, for sure. I mean, I mean that seriously. And, but actually to have gone through that ordeal, or whatever that was about, it's a big question. Why do people get hung up on things? And there were lots of terrible things going on. I mean, we were up against the state, with Alfie's trials for years, and, it's just a sort of trying to cope with that or whatever, partly, and, But, yeah, no, I think, like, to confront those things, to have to confront, like, those things about yourself, actually, like, to look at yourself honestly and say, I've done terrible things, I've done bad things, I've done things I feel so awful about, and I've hurt people and I've upset people, but everybody has done something like that, And we can't proceed, like, together as men and women, as people, if we don't allow for the possibility of making mistakes, and also about rectifying mistakes, insofar as it's possible. That would involve, like, acknowledging harm, but then not punishing people forever, and not punishing them excessively, or saying we can never speak to this person again, or, and who is the we in that anyway? And, so I think after Me Too, for example, like, I think there is this kind of reckoning, like, but, there's a sense in which, some of those harms, needed to be acknowledged. I mean, I spoke to one person privately about harm that had, been caused, and actually it was deeply cathartic, and it was a very important thing to do. I'm not saying everybody can do that. That might not be possible. You may not be able to do that. But rather than put this person's name online or something like this, and, obviously you're putting people's names online and saying this person is a Nazi or a TERF or an abuser or whatever, it's a powerful thing to do. If you use someone's name, it's like a weapon or it's a talisman or something, and it circulates, it becomes currency. But, that's the world that, this very thin sliver of the world that exists, and it's very easy and very binary. And I think that's, again, this sort of binary thinking is very encouraged by social media. There's no nuance about our own character. Like, so the idea that we could say, look, I have done terrible things, I've messed up, I've had problems, and everybody is capable of violence, everybody's capable of failure, everyone, of making mistakes. And to be honest about that with oneself and with other people, I mean, it's unbelievable. It is freedom. It is really genuinely like a form of freedom. And that doesn't mean anything goes. It doesn't mean I can say anything to you and think it's okay. Of course, I wouldn't do that anyway, but you know what I mean? Like, it's not like if you get rid of these prohibitions and you stop people feel anxious all the time, and you confront your own flaws and failings, that somehow it's this kind of, everyone will start saying horrible, terrible things. No, in fact, you become much more careful because you're thinking all the time, actually, in this very delicate and gentle way, in a sort of a way, how do you kind of maximize people's freedom and their pleasure and their happiness together? And it's a very gentle process, actually, and a very kind and thoughtful one.
Right, and you're not so defensive.
No.
Because you're not afraid.
No, I'm not afraid of anything. Like, I've got nothing to lose at this point. I don't feel afraid. If, like, people go for my jobs, if people go for me, if people attack me, like, it doesn't matter to me. I feel like I'm so happy just to, like, be alive and, like, enjoy things.
That's so amazing. That's
true.
So amazing. But that is a perfect illustration of that other side.
Yeah.
That you access only when you really make that commitment to kind of going all in on the truth, as it were. Not to sound too grandiose, but that is really kind of what happens. It's like it's this weird kind of portal to another life in some sense, when one kind of makes this unconditional, non-instrumental commitment to just being honest and just following the truth wherever it leads. If you really go all in on that, there's a fundamental kind of qualitative change that happens in your life, in your experience of the life. It's like you pop out the other side into this other kind of life.
Yeah.
And I think you're such an amazing kind of dramatization of that, your story.
Well, it's exit. You know. I mean, everybody's looking for an exit, actually. And, like, and you know, I'm not saying that you can force it, or the outside, or, you know, there is something, like, that you know, it's not just that there has to be, it's that there is an exit. Like, there is a way out of, like, misery. There is a way of, like, conceiving freedom, of living differently. You know, I would never have believed it. You know, I would never have thought, you know, I would have been, like, I don't know, sardonic, cynical, like, dismissive, you know, like, think that was the clever position, you know, and think, oh, that's, you know, of course, my gosh, you know, of course I'm critical, I understand everything's doomed or, like, miserable. But, like, it's just, you know, that's actually total defense. That's like keeping yourself trapped, you know. And I'm very interested in, like, liberation and freedom. Like, what does it mean to feel free, to make other people feel free, you know, to discuss difficult things all the time, you know, to have conversations that you know, just for the sake of them, and to understand better. And we're saying the same stuff.